so white people be crazy. Am I right?
I mean, isn't that just the opening to all of like the last 2 years? It's just like, ooh,
Oh
they
my
be
gosh.
wildin'.
They just be wilding out sometimes to the point where just like I don't even know. I feel like you have to have like the right friends to be able to call when the incidents they be wilding out. And what I've
Oh yeah,
learned is that I should call you because I had a situation where I was like, oh my gosh, I have curated my life where I don't have to deal with like straight white male aggressive energy. And I had a
yeah.
situation collaborating on something the other day, and I was like in shock. I was like shocked, shook, triggered. I had to go. I went for a walk. I meditated. I did cardio kickboxing. I like listened to sad music. It just was a lot. I was not emotionally prepared or ready. It was just too
I'm
much.
always ready because I grew up swimming. I grew up in a country club. I grew up
Oh, right.
or
Yeah.
I grew up going to a very fancy all girls private school where our brother's school was always around. Like, I feel like my first language is white man.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, I got fluent in the other languages. Like, I had to start there. And then I'm always jealous when people are like, oh, I've never dealt with like white people like this. I'm like, this has been my entire life. Like, I speak that language first. Like, I know what to do on Sweet Caroline. Over when I got to college, the first time I was at like a black frat party and the DJ, like notoriously the DJ will get to
Yes.
like Mo Money, Mo Problems, you get to the Biggie verse and they just turn the music off so everybody can rap. And I was like, when did we all learn this? When did, oh no, oh no.
Watermelon, watermelon.
Yeah, like I'm just like sitting there like, I know all the words to Baby Got Back. That's huge in the country club circuit. I'm like, B-52's Love Shack.
Well, I mean, that's my go-to for karaoke. Well,
That's my favorite song.
I used to work on and it's the perfect duet song. Notes aren't too high or anything.
No.
And like as I learned Sweet Caroline, I used to work on a cruise ship and we like got the whole
Oh, yeah.
audience before the show and they loved it. We did different sections where had different parts and they all knew it was like I felt like it was like Sister Act for like older white people. But karaoke, what I have learned, people here's my biggest advice for karaoke songs. For anybody who's like, I don't know what's a song to sing, because a friend of mine was like, I don't know, should I do this list of J Lo songs? No. If anybody's
No.
doing "If You Had My Love," I will murder everybody. Like
Yeah.
that. No one. You got to do the bops. You've got to do the ones that like everybody knows the words. The best thing to do, go for rap. You don't have to like hit the high notes or anything. Like Shoop is a crowd pleaser because then everybody else starts.
Happy.
It makes everybody happy. It gets the nostalgia thing. Everybody else knows the words. It feels like you're in a musical because like everyone knows the words. You can go pass the mic to somebody and it's like everybody's in it. Go for just like the bops that people want to hear. It is not your time to practice for American Idol. No one wants to see it.
My go-to is Sin Wagon by the Chicks, formerly known as the Dixie Chicks. It is got like a yodeling section in it. It's got all the things in it that nobody expects from a black girl who's like,
excuse
me. I'm
just
going to be singing Sin Wagon. And then like next thing you know, you're like yodeling and people are like, oh my God, what's happening?
And people get into it. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of music, we have to talk about, I've been trying to talk about this for weeks. This is Pop on Netflix. Like so what about right? My only thing is I hope that they do another season because like there was like just to talk about the bad first. I felt like they didn't talk about any of like maybe they couldn't talk about this because they'd have to talk about something else. They didn't talk about like Madonna, Janet, or Whitney, but is that because you then so also have to talk about Michael and we're just like, well, we're not opening up that.
I feel like they went into it doing one of those, like, those little docuseries where they're like, oh, it's a little throwaway thing. People won't care. Like the one about the clothes where they were like, oh, you guys might like it. And then people went nuts for it and were like crying over like a mesh t-shirt. Right. And they were like, it's the most beautiful show that's ever been created.
Season 2.
Yeah. I think they just put it out and then it was kind of like, well, maybe people will get into it. Maybe they won't. Cause there's so much to pop music and so much to like this. I mean, I told you before we started, I'm a massive Boyz II Men fan. Like,
and that's the first episode is like Boyz II Men. That's how they hook ya.
Like, that's how they. So my 8th birthday party. Yeah, well, the 8th or 10th. It might have been 10th. I don't know. I just know it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And my dad is good friends with a music exec who is it? I'm like, I just said music exec, like I don't know, and I'm like, I'm 1000% sure it's like Clive Davis or something. But like,
oh, just somebody. It's like Quincy
yeah,
Jones. Like, oh, some guy.
Yeah, like,
he works in music. Like he's
I'm
at
like, my dad's gonna hear this and be like, Mackenzie, like you're so disrespectful. Like, but
he works in music. I don't know.
Then that's when I have my Paris Hilton moments where I'm like, you sound so flippant and unappreciative. As you're like, I'm like, listen, Kathy Hilton, like, remember where you are.
Looking forward to your cooking show on Netflix coming out soon. Hopefully.
Who's Hunky Dory? But. And like, so we go, so my friends are, I'm telling them like, we're gonna have a sleepover and then we're going to a concert. Ooh. And I was 10. And so this is how much of a time capsule it was. We are in the basement before the concert watching NSYNC on the Disney Channel, because that was the infamous performance where the Backstreet Boys dropped out at the last second because they didn't want to be associated with Disney in Orlando and NSYNC. So it was like a new boy band that nobody had really heard of. And we're all in this basement, like dividing who gets who. And I don't like sharing a man. So I was like, I get Lance Bass, because everybody was like, Justin and JC. And I was like, damn it, I was too late. And so I was like, Lance.
I have the same. I ended up with Lance and Howie, but I think I was like going towards what I probably secretly thought were the gay ones.
Yeah, see, in my mind, it was Lance and Kevin. I was like, I love that tall, angry. Oh no, it was AJ, because I was like Kevin, and then my friend was like, I like Kevin, and I was like AJ McClain, and I was like, I picked the gay man and the drug addict. Like what? The tree. Yeah, I was like, look at what I wanted. But we go to the concert, and my dad's like, you got backstage passes. So it was like Merriweather Post Pavilion for any other DC people. And it was this meet and greet. Now watching This Is Pop, I realized in my mind, I thought they were like 25, like mid 20s. For
Boys to Men, yeah.
For Boys to Men. And I realized now watching This Is Pop, like they were like high schoolers. Like this was the first albums. I'm like, I was closer in age to them than my cousin was, who was over there being like, hey, Wanya. She was supposed to be our babysitter. And she was like in college. And she was like, hey, Wanya. And I'm like, what was he, like 17? And you were like 22?
Yes. It's so right. You know, I watching that documentary, and it's interesting you brought up I remember for so much of like I grew up listening to Boyz II Men. Everybody did, right? Like we all loved Boyz II Men. And what the documentary made me realize is like, because I remember thinking, I was like, oh, I wonder whatever happened to them. Oh, look, it's NSYNC. And what the documentary made you realize is that like Boyz II Men started it all. Yeah. Lou Pearlman copy and pasted everything that they did. He also was the manager of both NSYNC and Backstreet Boys. He created a false rivalry between
that whole thing is fascinating.
Copied and pasted, and then I'm in jail. But like he and just stole this formula. And what the documentary makes it, and it's like, oh my god, I was complicit. And once again, it made you realize how complicit we all were in like
what it's
Boyz
funny
II Men's career going away.
Is we all laughed when Kenya Barris did Black AF and every episode was like called Because of Slavery. But there was this moment in the Boyz II Men doc when Bivens said, because I loved like New Edition. Yes. I love, Bill Big
and same thing with New Edition, New Kids on the Block. Like it's
so there's happening. A moment when Bivens said, like, what did you think was going to happen? Like you thought America was going to be fine with white girls putting up posters of 4 black men in their bedroom, and it was like, no, they showed up with 5 nice, clean-cut white boys, and that's what it's just. Or there's that moment when the music reporter says, like, how? Because I don't know why I thought Motown Philly was like not their debut single, but when that reporter pointed out, when he pointed out how much of a flex that is to make a song about when you used to not be famous as your first, like your first song is about like, man, we're so famous and well known. Oh my God. Remember when we used to sing in school? It's
and
like
people said that was last week. That was literally like
you
last
wrote a song about how you were international stars and you were nobodies. Like what a fucking flex.
What I do appreciate is that they had like, Nick Lachey was there to represent all the white boy bands, and he like
I appreciate
he
came through.
He did. He was like, I'll be honest, like we all like, because every interview you ever heard from the boy bands, all of them were like, oh, we love and respect Boyz II Men. We used to listen to Boyz II Men, da da da. And Nick Lachey Lachey was like, yeah, and then we stole their shit and we
Yes,
copied
and
everything that they did. I appreciated that.
I had newfound respect for Nick Lachey because I think
Yes.
there's this fear, especially now in this world of a post-racial awakening for the country. There's this fear that people have of being like, yeah, I absolutely jacked all of that. Like I absolutely watched it and I knew you'd like it more palatable from me than you would from them.
Right.
And I think there's something almost that it makes it easier for me to be like, all right, Nick Lachey, I fuck with you now.
Right.
Like for him to just be like, absolutely, I did that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I same thing. Like I had a pause when, you know, there was the moment I was like, ooh, Nick Lachey, I don't know about that. Way back when there was on the Today Show, Hoda had Jessica Simpson on like the day before. And Jessica Simpson Jessica Simpson was like, oh yeah, like, you know, I was going through all like my like really big issues and things like that. And it was really sweet because like Nick and his like fiance, they like sent me a gift or something. Then the next day, Nick Lachey and is like, who is it? It's the Dorito girl.
Like, yeah, he was like, I have no clue what you're talking about.
Okay, it's so bad, even worse because like they like, and then they're like, she's like, oh, you sent her a gift. Hoda's like, oh yeah, you two sent her a gift. And like, no. And then Hoda's like, oh okay. She changes the subject. And then I forget what is the name of his wife.
Yeah, because she was Miss Teen USA, so she like became like an obsession with all the pageant girls.
100%. But she was like, Hoda was like, oh, okay, change the subject, and then she's like, hold on, I'm sorry. Did you say that we sent her a gift? Like, couldn't just let it go and brought it back? And then Nick was like, yeah, I don't know what she's talking about. It's like it was so awkward.
I'm just like, let the person make you into a saint. Like that would be my thing. If,
no,
like,
they were like not having it. They were like, she crazy.
If somebody wants to
She's
canonize
okay.
me, I'd be like, oh wow, you know, just the little things. I just tried to do what I could do.
Okay, I have two other main takeaways from This Is Pop. I feel like I will say the first 4 episodes are really great, and then it was like,
yeah,
okay,
then it putters, and you're like,
okay, I don't know about this. The Britpop was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know there was this huge thing between like Oasis and like Blur. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I also love like everything came out of Sweden. I'm like, oh,
yes, okay. So, but that's like the 2 points that I realized is like, oh, all pop music. So So boy bands all stole from.
It's all either Motown or Sweden.
Yes, that's it. So music all comes from Motown or Sweden. Like all of I already knew that Max Martin was pretty much behind every pop song of like the last like 2-3 decades. But then just to hear like the factory that they were really producing shit out of, it was like, oh, also they left Robin out of that documentary. Yeah. She was on a poster, so I don't know how like she's not there. And then I thought they did a really good job of like calling to effect of like country music because they're like, oh, Lil Nas X can't do country music.
That was my other favorite episode because again, all roads lead back to Boys to Men. When they had that show, The Sing Off, and Sean was a judge, and there was like a group singing country. He was like, at the end of the day, country is just white man's R&B, and everybody was, and like Ben Folds was like, that's the greatest thing ever. I want it on a T-shirt. Yeah, and I've always loved country music. Like my grandparents are from Kentucky. My dad's from Arkansas. Like we love country. I love it. It's gotten co-opted by a very interesting group of people who seem to have forgotten that Johnny Cash and all these people fought for equality and refused to play shows at segregated venues. But that's beside the point. But I also was in that camp that when Old Town Road happened, and even before that, when Beyonce went to the CMAs, and people were like,
with the chicks.
People were furious with her for singing with the chicks, and they were like, that wasn't country. And I was like, it is country. It is, like, country's not always like boot, scoot, and boogie to you. Like,
and it seems like the cutoff is like as soon as a black person's involved, it's suddenly not country. Yes.
And that was what was funny about that part of the doc, where it's like people that folks hold up like, oh, you know, Waylon Jennings. And it's like, yeah, Outlaw Country got named Outlaw Country because country folks didn't want him included. Then it's like, well, Shania Twain. And it's like, nobody thought she was country.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
Nobody. And so then all of a sudden it's like a black gay man is like, well, I'm gonna take like that song. I'm not kidding. Wherever I am, if I hear it, I'm like, this is the turn up. I don't know. And like my country soul hears it and is like, ooh, got
Ah.
horses in the band. Like, to this day, I still say one of the best BET Awards performances I've ever seen is Old Town Road, because like Billy Ray Cyrus got what Miley was fighting so hard for in just one song, and didn't have to change anything. It was just like,
Nope.
the horses in the band. And it's great watching all of these country stars like even acknowledge, like, yeah, I said it wasn't country, and then I listened to it and I thought, well, damn, this is good. And I'm like, yeah, give this man his due. Put him on the charts.
Get him on the charts. And the last one that I just, and then we'll switch gears here. I definitely felt so bad for T-Pain in that episode.
Oh my God.
And
justice for T-Pain.
He went through a 4-year depression after
Yes.
Usher on an airplane was like, you ruined music. Because T-Pain like pretty much was showed behind the curtains. Everyone's been using this thing called auto-tune for decades. And he was like, oh, let me just like amplify this so you really notice it. And everyone was like, I can't, it's our secrets are out. And then listen to many of Usher's tracks at the time, collaborating with T-Pain, using that like auto-tune. And then he's like, you ruined music on a jet on the way to the BET Awards.
Nothing hurt my heart more than that, because I was in college in 2006 to 2010, so in Florida. So that was like the height of like Nappy Boy. Like it was like nothing but Plies, T-Pain. Like I remember Shorty being like the most romantic song. Like I remember girls being like, oh my God, if they play Plies Shorty, I hope he asks me to dance. And I'm like, this is our bar. This is how this is where we are right now. Like, I love T-Pain. So for some reason, like hearing him be like, oh, I didn't know people I'm like, we need to start giving these people their flowers more often.
Yeah. I'm glad that he got to speak, because I didn't know, like just hearing like, and people need to just be nicer to people. Like people were just going off on T-Pain, and then everybody using the auto-tune, and then like, but I just hear like all music differently. I'm like, oh, did she really hit that note? Or were they just like, let me just help her out a bit and let me just auto-tune that a little bit.
It's to this day, when they were showing the Cher thing, I was like, I remember Believe coming out and being like, this is the strangest sounding song I've ever heard in my life, and just not liking it. Every time it would come on TRL, I'd be like, no. I'd be like, believe it. And I was like, oh, no. And then T-Pain happened when I was in college, and I was like, and again, I thought that was a Florida thing. Like, I was like, oh, that's like, just like DC has Go-Go. I think that's why it didn't bother me, because I'm like, the Bay Area had that voice modulator thing, and then like the constant, and then I was like, oh, it's a regional thing that you do. Like, people that's what Florida does. And people were like, he's ruining singing. And I'm like, child, just be quiet.
Well, speaking of somebody ruining something, so I feel like Jeopardy might be ruined. So where did this guy come from? So we have a new Jeopardy host, and sit down, because it's not LeVar Burton, which it's Mike Richards, which I know you're thinking, who the fuck is Mike Richards? And you'd be correct. You might remember him as one of the executive producers behind the scenes of Jeopardy. And maybe that's it. Yes. So
did you read that great Cut article where they were like, the Jeopardy host search was emblematic of every job search in America, where like they bring in really talented, diverse cast of overly qualified applicants only to choose the white man that they've been like bringing up through the ranks internally.
Yes. And yes, 100%. They were like, "Oh, let's pretend like we already know." They already knew who they were going to probably bring in, and like they had Leah Remini. I would have loved a Leah Remini hosting Jeopardy, because she's so feisty and fierce.
Or like I was very big on like, or one of the former champions. I think what hurts about it being LeVar is like when we think about these like kind of like Mount Rushmore of like men that taught us to be the kind. It's like it's always like Bob Ross, Mr. Rogers, Alex Trebek. But my thing is like people always forget to add LeVar Burton.
He taught us to read.
Because I'm like, because that's my thing is like, he not only just taught us to read, it's like somebody said this thing where they were like, losing Alex Trebek is hard because in a world where truth keeps getting manipulated, this was a man that felt like he protected the citadel of factual information. And I think my thing was, oh, then that next person is LeVar Burton. Like
Yeah.
his entire thing has been, you're gonna learn something. If you sit
Yeah.
down with me, you're gonna learn something.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was like, oh, it's a no-brainer. Like Mr. Rogers ain't alive, so pick LeVar Burton.
Yeah, and it's a generational thing. It's like this art, like we're like, who's watching Jeopardy now? Like we're coming in. It would keep us watching Jeopardy for like even longer. Plus, this Michael Richards dude has like discrimination allegations against him.
Of course he does.
Why did you choose this? And someone was saying, oh, this is like Hollywood nepotism at work again. It reminded me of, there was this tweet off, or like this flame, I don't know, what do the kids call it? What do you call it when someone's arguing on Twitter? Is just an argument?
Like, so, I think it's just an argument. I don't
know.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if there's always a term for something. So.
There might be, but I'm an old, so I don't know. They'll let us know.
Ben Stiller and Franklin Leonard had this debate about Hollywood nepotism, because there's this movie that came out, and Franklin Leonard tweeted. So there's a movie coming out, and it's got Hopper Penn, so Sean Penn's son. Brian Darcy James has also been cast in it, from director Destry Spielberg, Steven Spielberg's daughter, and writer Owen King, Stephen King's son. And so he just tweeted, it's all these like white kids, and he just tweeted out Hollywood nepotism, am I right? And then Ben Stiller's like, tweets back, too easy, people work in creating, everyone has their own path, wish them the best.
Oh,
and
Ben, Jerry's son, sir.
Yeah, and then his mom was what's her, Ann Miller? Is it?
Yeah.
Did I make that up? Yes. Okay.
No, but it's like this is why I like Billie Lourd, because at least she'll be like, yes, I am Debbie Reynolds' granddaughter, and I like, and my mother was here. Princess Leia. Like she's very clear of like, how do you think I got here?
These doors opened up because I was actually already inside the room. I was born inside the room. Like the door.
That statement is why I adore like Kavia James and Kavia James Wade and Zaya, LeBron's daughter, and Alexis Ohanian, and all of these like little, like even Steph Curry's kids, when people are like, they sure are bad. I'm like, no, they're precocious, because when children that don't look like them do that, everybody's like, oh, she's such a little scamp. She's so precocious. You're going to grow up to be a star, just like your mother, Goldie, Kate. You're so wonderful. And I'm like, that's why when Blue Ivy's over there singing Lift Every Voice and saying however the hell she wants on her mother's album and getting a Grammy, I'm like, yes.
Yes. Absolutely. Please do. Oh, love it, Blue Ivy. We talked about this last week, but my favorite is in the Beyonce article from last week. She was like, I walked in and saw my daughter just, she was like,
in the bathtub, relaxing.
Just
I was
decompressing.
Like, Blue has a hard life. She's like,
with the honey, with the bee wax that she had made with cucumbers on her eyes in a bathtub, just decompressing. I'm like, of course she is.
Blue Ivy is what I imagined she was. In that quote, I was like, oh, everything I thought this little girl was, she is. Oh, great. I'm like, and then I have moments where I'm like, I hope she is that diva. Yeah. I hope she is that like Hollywood nepotism. Like when I think about like a Kate Hudson or like Beanie Feldstad, like these people who have this very like not like Ben Platt, these people who don't seem to fully comprehend that like, yes, Ben, you dropped out of college to live in New York in a nice apartment to which you had the money, means, and access to audition for the Book of Mormon. So I too hope Blue Ivy says something wildly unrelatable, like, I chose after high school to follow, be an intern. And everybody's like, yeah, for the CEO of Adidas, where your mother has a clothing line. Like,
yeah, I had a startup, I started with barely anything. I just had a loan from my parents for $500,000, but
and my aunt was like
my first film.
And my aunt, she was so kind to donate some of the clothes and makeup. It's like, you mean Rihanna, Fenty, Robin? She did. My Aunt Robin and my Aunt Kelly was so kind to just get along for the soundtrack. The lady who has the Grammys?
Yeah, okay.
That wasn't a
So
free song, but
but
okay.
but that goes back to, so in this article they were talking about like how, so Ben Stiller's trying to be like, oh, Hollywood's a meritocracy, like if you don't really have talent. And I feel like there are maybe some like very, I'm
Yes,
sure there are some people who they're not talented, their parents were, and they just got pushed out. But you've
absolutely.
already starting on, I don't know, the 50-yard line, or you're
Yeah.
in the touchdown. You are starting, some of us are not even in the stadium, right? And have to like claw our way to get in there. And then Franklin Leonard brought up this really great point, and he said, you know, statistically speaking, roughly a third of the industry has their job not because of merit, but because of factors of who they know, colonial legacy, sexism, or whatever. And then goes on to bring this point that it's not just access, it's also undervaluation, it's active discrimination, and that the Hollywood film suite is the least diverse sector in American business, less diverse than Trump's cabinet. And it just was such a, just, I already knew that, but it's like, just hearing that and seeing that, it makes sense for like the music industry as well, right? Like you have
Yeah.
all these very untalented old rich white men at the top who are just making all these decisions. It's a miracle that any of us get to do anything. And then
I
you
think
get
that's what has
that's
always amused me in my career and wanting to be in this space of entertainment is that you get a lot of like I used to I know people think it's a compliment. They're like, oh, you're so funny. You should have been a comedian. You should have been this. And I think it wasn't until I got to my undergrad and the first time I was trying to be on air talent, and it was the student producer I had to report to, and the student station manager. And I realized like, oh, they make the decision of who goes on air and who doesn't. They
mm-hmm,
decide the scripts. They decide whether
mm-hmm.
or not we spend all week talking about what Miami football player got arrested versus like who's doing a backpack drive. And that was when like the flip switched for me. And I very much became like, I want to I want to be Michael Eisner. Like at the time it
Yeah,
was Michael Eisner, then it was Bob
yeah,
Iger. But I was like, I want to be that person. And I was like,
right.
because we, then this is when I put like my her tap hat on. And I'm
Hot
like,
tap! Here for it.
like, and that's when I turned into like, we need to own this stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why when people get very like, aren't you, oh, you should start your own business. I'm like, I don't want to start. I want to homeland this shit. I want to
Yes.
get in and then
Mm-hmm.
be at the top and then start. And where
Yes.
people are like, wow, this is wild. Have you noticed
Uh,
that we no longer make weird, problematic cartoons here at Disney anymore? Huh. When did that
oh,
start? And it's like, well, because there's a
well, when
black lady
Mackenzie
here.
Green was like heading it up. And can you please, that way I'm not sitting in a meeting being, that's where my whole entire thing is, because there's a power dynamic. And that's why, going back to earlier, I was so shut down when this aggression was happening, because there was a power dynamic and got threatened of like, this project might not happen, of like, because I'm not bowing down to the situation so I can't wait for that day. And to your point, that's why, like, there's a point, like, recently, I think the head of HBO, I don't know if it's still a black woman, or the person who's like helping to greenlight projects,
Yeah,
there's a
the
black
project.
woman very high up. Because I said to my friend who, or she's been on the show, Ashley Nicole Black, and I was like, man, there's so many, like, every time there's always like black folks on HBO, and she's like, that's because there's a black woman like greenlighting projects
Exactly.
over there.
Exactly. Like that's why you end up with HBO Max having a show about streetwear that's not
Yes.
like that's not so inside baseball that you're like, oh shit, they're gonna steal everything out of this show. But like a
Uh-huh.
very specific homage to streetwear, or you get things like a Black Lady sketch show, or you get
Mm-hmm.
things like Watchmen having black people in it, or
Lovecraft
like
Country. It was just for,
Lovecraft Country,
yes.
like even just something as simple as like
Euphoria.
yeah,
I May
Euphoria,
Destroy
or even
You.
the fact that like the characters are fairly repugnant on White Lotus, like to a point that
Yeah.
you're not like, oh, how
Oh.
glamorous, that you're like, oh, or like Gossip Girl, like we said, having so many black people that were
Mm.
like,
Oh, this
what?
is okay. Oh man, and at the bottom of the ninth inning, you drop the White Lotus, and we've got to go to our next
I'm
segment.
telling you, we're going to the next one.
All right. Well, we'll put a TV continue on White Lotus. It's better this way so people can catch up and watch it, and we won't spoil
Yeah,
anything quite yet. But
I have
all
to
right.
watch it.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
No, I know
Okay.
of it because we had Sydney Sweeney as our cover star in August for the Who What Wear magazine, and I truly knew nothing about her, and I was like, "Oh, you're a delight." And then after she left, I Googled her, and I was like, "Shit, she's in Euphoria. She's on this show that everybody loves." I was like, "She's turning this book that I like into into a TV show with Halsey." And I was like,
turning it up, yeah. Oh, last thing I just want to mention: where do you fall in this latest Mandela effect? Was Sinbad ever in a movie called Shazam?
He was not in a movie called Shazam, but he did a movie about genies. And then Shaq did a movie about genies.
Called Kazam.
I don't understand. I think I'm having a stroke every time one of these Mandela effects comes up.
I know. Well, I think that people also just are confusing two black
I think they are too. Just two tall, bald black men. They're like, I've seen that before.
Oh, and they're really making it up to the point where like Sinbad's parents are having not parents, but kids are just like, no, that wasn't my dad. Like it's just like, leave Sinbad alone. He doesn't know this. I just let him do his thing.